As bold as lions. As bold as lions.
As bold as lions.
As bold as lions.
You're listening to the As Bold as Lions podcast.
Hello, welcome to the As Bold as Lions podcast. Great to have you join me. I am your host, and my name is Derek. The As Bold as Lions podcast, a weekly offering for the most part throughout the year of episodes just in all aspects of life. I think we've covered, just to go back over this last year, we've covered things like the armor of God. We've looked at the Psalms, some individual Psalms for a few weeks. We've talked about the issue of transgenderism and the church and just how we're approaching that. Some other things, I'm losing it. We've had a lot of individual episodes just on kind of random topics. We did something on the church post-COVID, kind of interesting because, we're hearing a lot about COVID again. So, but how do we still kind of live in this post-COVID mindset and keep going forward as a church that continues to meet? All of those things, all of those have been topics, I believe, for 2023. And crazy enough, we're thinking about 2024 already, and knowing that this Raising the Standard series that we're in right now, this is something geared towards men. Would love to know if this has been helpful to you, maybe specifically or just in general for you to pass along. However, it's kind of resonated with you. Maybe personally you're saying I've got some reasons why. Maybe you're a female and you're just say it's great stuff, but it's not, specifically towards me. So I'm maybe taking a break. I can respect that. Otherwise, if you're still listening and say, I want to know these things so I know how to pray for the men in my life and kind of pray towards where they're at in each of these stages of their lives. Great. But if something has resonated with you, whether it's this series, whether it's something else that we've talked about, even like hymns that I've gone back to and done, the Hymns That I Love series, things that you are kind of looking for or wanting to hear, that gives me a little bit of guidance. It kind of helps me keep a pulse on what people are dealing with, what they're going through, what they need to hear. I sometimes assume, well, this is what I need to hear, so everybody needs to hear it. And sometimes God's just like, well, I showed you that, and that is just for you. That's not to put on social media today. That's not to be like, hey, this is this great word for everybody. That's just for you. And so sometimes I have to have that check in my spirit that says, there's some things that God is just saying to me that I need to just deal with. And if he leads me to say, share that with some others, great. If it's just to keep it to myself, great. And I think we all have those things. I think we can all say, man, I know I need to hear that today, God. I'm taking that to heart. So just some kind of background of where we've been. I'm really excited for this series as it's been going out, each week. And these last couple of weeks here, as I'm kind of taking an afternoon to record the last two and then taking a break for a little while here as, the rest of the fall kind of moves forward. That's some time to just gear up again and think about what's ahead. And with As Bold as Lions, with the ministry that I do, DerekCharlesJohnson.com, you can find out a little bit more there. There's a lot that I just want to prayerfully consider. What do you want me to write? What do you want me to talk about? How can I be a vessel for you? So thanks for being with me on this journey. We are moving into the title being Putting Christ on Display to the Career and Family Man. So as we transition into the topic today, we've already kind of taken a week to introduce all of this, kind of set the stage. And then we took a week to start on this journey, talking to the young and single man, just saying, how do you find God's heart? How do you follow after him? Now we're going into a phase of life that, for myself personally, I can identify with this the most. I'm not really sure when a man crosses the threshold and we consider them like, this is a career guy. This is, I guess the family man aspect is pretty obvious. You get married or you start having kids, like that just seems like, the logical progression, hopefully married. And then you start having kids. That's kind of the best way that the Bible, leads us. Certainly others that have gotten that the other way around, and God can still take that and use that for his glory. Anyway, this whole series, as we kind of come into this time, considering what it means to be that family man, that career guy. So you start having the family, maybe you buy your first home, maybe you do something really big, like open your first retirement account, the job with the 401k, I almost said 501k, shows how much I know about it. 401k and Roth accounts, all that kind of stuff that we should all be doing, I guess. Knock on wood with the stock market. But anyway, I think I ended the one phase and kind of entered this next phase that I'm in now, about the age of 24. And I don't know if that seems young or old to people listening, but I got married at that age and then became sort of, as the song that I introduced in the first series, first episode called 100 Years, you're a couple, Derek and Corey. So we are the Johnsons. That's kind of at 24, the mid 20s is where I feel like that started to happen, where you're not going to college anymore, where you're, you're not just taking out loans and going to school and doing all, like you're now paying those loans back. You're working a job. You are providing, you're doing all that stuff. And from there, I started to grow into this role, but I'm still growing into it. 20 years later, I'm still just like, man, I'm so bad at some of this stuff still. I'm still just not getting some of the things that I need to get. And God, give me grace to understand it more and to lead well, to lead my family, to lead my wife, be the spiritual leader that they need, all those things. So no matter if you're young and you're still in high school or you're in college, or if you're on the other end of this, as we talk next time about the retirement years, I think you'll still find something that's applicable here. And those are the two segments that kind of bookend this discussion. But this middle section, the years actively working, raising the family, providing for the family, overseeing the home, that is if you get married and you're not single for your entire life, these are the years that mark the majority of your life. This is where you spend, if it's 70, 80 years, whatever the average life expectancy is right now, this is the time that you have the largest window of time devoted to. And, really it's like maybe 30 to 40 years, give or take. You think about retiring and some of us would hope to say, well, I'm going to retire after 30 years on the job, or I'm going to retire after X number of years. Well, then we step into a new season because we're not then in that phase of working every day. And the kids are probably grown up and graduated high school, maybe into college, maybe married themselves, maybe starting their own families. All of that's happening. So there's all of these things. For myself, just to look into my own life, I had my first kid at 29. And then when my last child graduates, I'm going to be into my 60s. I'll be around 60, I believe. So that's a long phase. We have 5 kids. We had a few bam, 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 and then waited a little bit and then waited a little bit more. And so there's a wide spread between oldest to youngest. And so we get kind of this whole phase of life for quite a long time. And I think that's why I still feel like, God, I'm just trying to figure it out and I'm still not there. But you can pray for me, even as I'm maybe a third to halfway through. The Lord would just continue to help us to navigate it all. I think a lot of guys feel this way. It's like I'm just holding on for dear life, hoping that I'm doing something right. And I'll pray for you as well. Often in the day-to-day grind of life, I think as guys, it's easy to lose our focus, and we have a hard time just discovering and sort of adhering to and maybe even just finding the purpose throughout the season, like to keep coming back to like what am I supposed to be doing? What's the main thing? Last time a lot of life happens in this phase as we go from just newly married to then knocking on the door of like grandfatherhood and retirement. So there's a lot of life that's happening. And in the midst of this, we desperately have to come back to what truly matters. I have to remind myself all the time. We have to avoid distractions and just those things that the enemy can put before us that can keep us off course. Especially thinking of the ones that follow in our footsteps. As I have 4 boys and a girl, especially those boys into right on the threshold of manhood, of adulthood themselves, thinking of like, what am I modeling for them? What am I showing them? How much are they going to then retain and reflect of me? Is it going to be a thing that's honoring to Christ, or is it going to be, a poor reflection that's going to not show Christ? And that really, a lot of that hinges on me. There's Proverbs 14:12 is a verse that here comes to mind. It says, there is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way to death. Some harsh words there, some very real words. We must find the way that is right, not just the way that seems right. We live in a world that continually just says, be your best version of you. Find what makes you happy. What is it that feels good to you? What seems right? Do that. Be a decent person and all that. All those kind of mantras that they're throwing out. But we have to find what is right. It's not our standard. It's God's standard. And so today is about framing our lives in that context, knowing that the Bible gives us a lot of direction if we're willing to read it, if we're willing to look at it. So there's a few main points today, as always, and we're going to move through those. It's kind of a progression of thought here with all of this. And again, if you know somebody that's in this phase of life or maybe about to enter it, this is hopefully something that you can pass along to them and say, hey, this may give you some direction. You may be overwhelmed at the thought of getting married or having your first child or buying that first home or whatever it is that's in front of you. Here's some stuff to just remind you to hold on to. So first point I have is life is about more than building your castle. Luke 12:18 and 19. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. It's a great parable in Luke 12, and I kind of just picked the essence of what I want to talk about here, but within the context of this is the parable of the rich fool. So all of that this man is saying to himself about his money and what he's going to do, this guy really is a fool, as in terms of what Jesus says about him. But he's a guy who is in this stage, like we are, and he wants to get to kind of this level where he's just content, where he's just like, I've got it all. The business is running, the family, the home's good, everything's big, big, big. It's just getting better and better. And he just wants to get to that point where he's like, I can just kind of put it on autopilot and just sit back and just take it all in. And honestly, like, who doesn't, if we're honest with ourselves, who doesn't want some of that? Like, you look at how hard life is sometimes and you just say, I just want a taste of that, God. I want, I want to know the bank accounts just fine. There's plenty there. I want to know the cars are going to drive and they're new and they're fine. I want to know everybody's healthy and my job is good and things are just, things are coming up roses every day. And we like that. We like the thought of all that. But Jesus calls this man's attitude foolish and selfish. It's a stumbling block that keeps this man from the true inheritance he should have in Christ. He's storing up everything for this life. He has nothing prepared for what is to come. He goes on to say, Luke 12, verse 20, but God said to him, Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? See, when life is all about building our castle and just storing up treasure for tomorrow, we are no better off than the rich fool who only lived for himself. And when he died, when his life was called of him, taken from him, basically, his treasure and all he gained were of no value. He couldn't take it with him. He couldn't even oversee like who would come in and have it. It's possible that all this great stuff then just gets passed on to somebody else who had really no effort in trying to get all that, and they just squander it. They just waste it. When we live a lifestyle that is within our means, unextravagant, and generous towards others, God gets all the glory. One more time. When we live a lifestyle that is within our means, unextravagant, and generous towards others, God gets all the glory. As men, we want to provide good things for our families, and there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself. But there's a point at which we have to reconcile ourselves before God and consider if what we are living for is simply worldly or otherworldly. Are we living for this world, or are we living for the one that is to come? Our mindsets shift as we think in terms of building his kingdom versus building our own kingdom. And from there, you can get into the weeds a little bit more in your own life and examine and just say, how am I investing my time? How am I investing my talents, my resources? How am I using those things to further the kingdom of the Lord? If you have more interest on this point specifically, I did a series, 2-part series, back in February of this year. It's one I didn't mention at the onset, but it's called Be Generous. And it has some more points just about how we become people who live in that attitude of just open-handedness with the Lord. And I think that's what it's really about. If I'm about open-handed, God, I give you my life, I give you my money, my bank account, my house, my kids, my wife, I give you all this stuff freely, then he's going to use it and he's going to get all the glory. And that's what we're after as men, especially in this season. Second point I have today is be a servant. Model Christ. John 13:15, for I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done to you. So Jesus has washed his disciples' feet. This is his Passover meal with them. We know it's the Last Supper. And he's going to the cross, but he makes a point to them that this is what they should model to others. This servant-like attitude of washing each other's feet. But there's a larger, even more profound application here. And just to explain that is when we as men take on roles of service, and that's primarily in the home, but at work, in the church, other places as well, we're doing something that the rest of the world does not know how to comprehend. They don't know how to really frame that when a man is coming into that low position and putting others before him. Because a man's role is often seen as being, you got to be a hard charger, you got to lead, you got to get out in front, you got to achieve things, you got to just keep like that rich fool. You just got to keep like building. And again, there's not necessarily something that's wrong in that. I'm not bashing the attributes of being an achiever, of being a leader. We need men who lead, but we need men who lead by serving. What if we were to get equally as passionate about getting low, taking that humble position so someone else can be raised up? What would that look like? I think that's one of the most manliest things I can do. One of the manliest things I can do is say, hey, to tell my wife, I'm gonna clean the bathroom. I'll scrub the toilets. I'll get down there and get that thing clean. I'll put away the dishes. Hopefully I've washed my hands in between working on the bathroom and going to the kitchen. But anyway, I'll vacuum. I'll take the kids to school. I'll pick them up. I'll go to the football practice. I'll do that thing I know you've been kind of just agonizing over and not wanting to do. I'll go do. I'll talk to that person. How can we do that in our marriages? And how can that send a message to our wives, to our children, like, hey, dad's in the middle of this too. Yeah, he's the leader. He's out in front. He's got us. He's the spiritual leader. He's protecting the home. He's doing all that. He's taking down that, but he's also with us right alongside of us. If Christ did it, I want to be manly like my Savior. I want to follow his example. When you're quick to apologize to your children for maybe something you've said, an ill word spoken out of turn, that's getting down and washing their feet. When you're doing the laundry, when you're taking out the trash, cleaning up the kitchen, that's washing your wife's feet. When you're at the job and you're making sure someone else at work gets that special recognition because they put in time. And a lot of people aren't going to see that. They're not even going to know how hard that person worked on that project. And you say, hey, remember so-and-so because they put in the work. You are washing their feet. And that's the trend that I hope you see here, that it's a humbling thing. It may look like it's weakness, but Jesus' meekness as a servant was not weakness. He put others before himself in a way that ultimately the Father was honored and glorified. He's wanting to point us back to the Lord. When we model Christ in this way to our family, to others in our lives, God gets all the glory. And the world needs more of these kind of men. We desperately do. All right, so we've gone through, and each of these points, hopefully you're hearing this, and it's if nothing else, it's just getting you to ponder some of these things. Talking about life being more than building your own castle, being a servant, modeling Christ, especially in these years. Third and final point that I have is that we have to model what true love and sexuality looks like. Job, there's a verse in chapter 31, verse 1. This is Job speaking. It says, I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a young woman. I don't care what age group you fall into, and we talked some about this last time. It continues throughout the whole discussion for us as men that we will struggle with lust for our entire lives. I think that's pretty much almost any guy. There's some that maybe it's not such an issue for, but I'm guessing if it's not that, it may be something else. But the struggle we have comes with the opportunity to then speak into lives of younger men because of what we have learned. Brings the opportunity to model what love looks like. One man, one woman for life. Brings the opportunity to model Christ's love for his church being the bride. And we do that in the home as we love our wives in a similar fashion. Brings the opportunity to say, even with our mistakes in relationships or our mistakes in purity, we can point to a better way. The Bible serves as the ultimate authority, and even Job here in his advanced age, he makes a covenant to say lust is not going to have a place in my heart. And for the young men in last week's episode, there's constant pressure to just to conform to what society and the popular culture is saying on this topic, just kind of whatever the in thing is about it. If it feels good, do it. That's this overarching sentiment of the day, but that is destructive to say the least. A man who's married and fully committed to God, his wife, and his family, he is one of the most dangerous men on the planet. I say dangerous because he stands against all that Satan seeks to do and to destroy. When we don't look at women just as sexual objects and glorify the gods of lust and passion, we make a statement that raises a higher standard. God's design for relationships was forever marred and tainted in the garden, but we have the ability through Jesus to seek redemption in the areas of love and sex. Godly men live by these high standards, and they model them for generations to come. Guys, this, I don't want to say is perhaps the most important of all these points, but I ended here because we have to understand love. Maybe we've had our own messed up upbringings, and maybe we've been told that women are just objects and things that we can just use in this way. But we have to break that cycle, and we have to break that pattern of just looking at women, at our marriages, at just women in general, and realizing that God has created them. The women that we are married to, they are our helpmates. They're not the enemy. And we need to have strong bonds of trust and commitment, love and respect with them. And so I've done some things in the past on marriage, and I probably need to do some more again in the future, but kind of an offshoot of this, these years of being a career and family man, these are the years that will be defined by what your marriage was like. What was the foundation that marriage is built upon? And man, it's so important. It's so important to, when you say I do, to take that as your vow and your covenant before the Lord. And when you say, till death do I part, we will work at this thing. We will constantly put it before the Lord. He is the third strand of this cord, and it will not be broken. As we close out today, and I hope this has been helpful, there's a couple challenges that I have for us as men. And you may be hearing all of this and fall into one of I guess a couple categories that I assume are responding to all of this. The first one just being like, man, as I consider building my own kingdom, what I'm after, the level of servanthood that I'm displaying, the issues of lust and sexuality, purity. So I'm considering all of that I'm not close to where I need to be with all of this. And I would respond with, that's okay. There's room here to know that we're works in progress and that no one's perfect. But my challenge to you is to say, how do I find some accountability? How do I find other men that are walking the same road, maybe a little bit further along the path, but they can help me because I'm struggling with this issue or that issue. If it's lust, find a mature believer who you can ask some tough questions to, and somebody that can help you find freedom. If it's just serving your family, find somebody who you look to and admire and say, this guy is doing that, and I want to be like what he's doing. And just to pattern yourself after that person, and ultimately pattern yourself after Christ, because that is who they are emulating. Whatever it is, the shortcoming that you feel as you hear all of this, as you're kind of convicted, find someone who causes you to aspire to be a better man. And if that's something that your church doesn't offer, then keep looking for it. If it's something you need to start, maybe it's a men's Bible study, then take this as, the urge and the push of the nudge in that direction to say, go for it. And there's another set of men that are listening to this, and they're hitting it out of the park in a lot of these things. Not to put them on a pedestal or anything, but there are men who say, I'm trying to serve my family well. I'm trying to serve in the home. I'm like Job, I refuse to lust after a young woman. I'm keeping my eyes pure and my thoughts pure, and I'm about the kingdom that is to come. I'm not just enamored with everything that this life has. For those kind of guys that are hearing this, I would urge you to find other men that you can mentor. Men that are in that first category, that are looking for that are craving that. Maybe it's somebody at your church. Maybe it's somebody at your job who is a believer. You just start by grabbing a cup of coffee. And maybe you're not immediately just prying into their lives, but you're allowing that relationship to grow, that trust level to kind of deepen. And there you're then modeling Christ, and you're allowing that person to see you up close, to see your family, to see your interactions, to see how you live your life. And then for hopefully that to rub off to some extent. We so desperately need men who are willing to mentor and father the next generation that is coming up. There are many who are fatherless, but yet are in the faith. They need to see Christ with skin on. So I ask that you pray about this and you'd see who God might lead me to. Like I said, I'm in this stage right now. I'm in this journey. It's a long stage, but it's rewarding. There's a lot of good stuff that happens in this family man, career man stage of life. And as we go along, we go deeper with Christ, we need to start investing back into the generations that follow us. We're setting up some patterns that ready us as well for the next stage that we're going into, which are the graying years of our lives. If you're like me, you've got some of that gray going on already. Doesn't mean I'm wise, but it's happening. But this phase of life, bridging the years between young and single and older and wise, these are the years that we must get right and get serious before the Lord. Men need to be men in Christ-like holiness and godliness. He is our great example, our perfect example. And I just urge us all to pursue him together. Guys, I would love to hear from you. info@derekcharlesjohnson.com. Any way that I can be praying for you, anything that you just, thoughts, reflections, whatever you have, comments about this episode or other things that you've read or listened to. Always have an open door about all that. We are going to close with Ephesians 5:15 through 17. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Guys, I hope you'll come back for the last episode in this Raising the Standard series, and have a blessed day. Hey guys, this is Derek Charles Johnson. You have been listening to the As Bold as Lions podcast. I am a blogger, a songwriter, an artist, and if you've been encouraged by this podcast, please go ahead and subscribe and share, and head over to derekcharlesjohnson.com for more encouraging content. God bless.